I am not a rat. You are not a rat. Yet, it seems to me that the society that we live in is a rat race society. So, some of the things that are on my mind today have to do with looking for moments in this busy, possibly psychotically, sociopathically busy society that we live in. Looking for moments where we can hit the reset button, find silence, quiet, and ways to bring our attention into the moment to exit the rat race and manifest our true face, as we call it, in Zen. There's a reason that this is on my mind. And it's on my mind because I've been reading a philosopher that I discovered when I was in America. I got really sick and I was like locked up in a bedroom in my mom's basement. And I was just, I couldn't, I was serious stomach flu. And it just knocked me the heck out. And so I couldn't even read, so I was listening to YouTube videos and I discovered a new philosopher, and he's a South Korean gentleman. He moved to Germany. He's a self-described Germanophile and a Hegelian. And he moved to Germany when he was like in his 20s, and he's become a really interesting thinker. He's like a postmodern thinker, but he is not in the vein of those little French demons, Derrida, Foucault, and Baudrillard, those guys that present profound critiques of contemporary society and then leave you hanging. This guy, Byung-Chul Han, seems to be using critique to open up a space where we can begin to consider spiritual values. And so I've really taken this guy to heart because I think thinkers like that are so important. So this is the guy, Byung-Chul Han. The Burnout Society is his real most famous book. And then he wrote another one called In the Swarm, Digital Prospects, where he's talking about the internet. It's a brilliant book. I've read these two books. There's a third one called The Philosophy of Zen Buddhism, which I'm going to save to read later, and maybe I'll do a whole video about it. The Burnout Society begins with this sentence: every age has its signature afflictions. Neurological illnesses like depression, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, borderline personality disorder, BPD, and burnout syndrome mark the landscape of pathology at the beginning of our 21st century. These signature afflictions of our age, they are not infections, which is to say something attacking you from the outside, but infarctions. An infarction is a problem generated from within, okay? So he says they are not infections, but infarctions. They do not follow from the negativity of what is immunologically foreign, but from an excess of positivity. This notion of an excess of positivity, it took me a while to sort of get what he was talking about. I had to read through this book a few times and kind of digest it. But basically what he's saying is we lack the ability to say no. We're inundated with these signals from our society that we can do something. Yes, yes, yes. You can do it. You can be anything you want to be. You want to be president of the United States? You can do that. You want to build spaceships and go to Mars? Hell, you can do that. You can do anything you want. Yes, 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 yes. This is the excess of positivity. And I think in a very subtle way, this author is trying to suggest that the word no is crucial for health, and it's crucial for what he will go on to call the good life. So chapter 2, he talks about Foucault. And he says, today's society is no longer Foucault's disciplinary world of hospitals, madhouses, prisons, barracks, and factories. It has long been replaced by another regime, namely a society of fitness studios, office towers, banks, airports, shopping malls, and genetic laboratories. He says 21st century society is no longer a disciplinary society, but rather an achievement society. We are entrepreneurs of ourselves. Prohibitions, commandments, and the law are replaced by projects, initiatives, and motivation. Disciplinary society is still governed by no. And of course, he's told us earlier that no is gone. So he says, disciplinary society is governed by no. Its negativity produces madmen and criminals. In contrast, achievement society creates depressives and losers. Whew. I thought that was really powerful. Depression is the sickness of a society that suffers from excessive positivity. It reflects a humanity waging war on itself. Excess work and performance escalate into auto-exploitation. So auto meaning self-exploitation. The exploiter is simultaneously the exploited. Perpetrator and victim can no longer be distinguished. And in this situation where you gotta get up and you gotta hustle and you gotta sell yourself and you gotta become yourself and you gotta become the person that you're presenting on Instagram and you gotta become the person with the smile that brightens the room, that's positive, that doesn't drag anyone down. You gotta become the person that the boss wants to hire, that the boss wants to promote. You know, all of this stuff, you burn out from the inside. Like you burn out. That's kind of what he's talking about, seems to me. Chapter 3, he talks about what he calls profound boredom. So this chapter and some of the following chapters, he's going to suggest alternatives to this burnout society. So he says, excess positivity expresses itself as an excess of stimuli, information, and impulses. So it radically changes the structure and economy of attention. Perception becomes fragmented and scattered. So when you can't say no, you get inundated with stimuli, right? And he goes on to have kind of a very funny and biting paragraph about how basically the condition of having scattered attention and being able to multitask is actually what an animal does. So animals are incapable of contemplative immersion or deep focus or silence. Animals are incapable of this because they're, as he puts it, they're either always eating or copulating, right? So they're looking for something to eat, they're looking to not be eaten, and they're looking to have something to have sex with. And this way of life is constantly producing distractions. So contemplation is not the way of the animal. Rather, multitasking or always having a very light, superficial mode of attention is the way of the animal. And he's saying it's the way of the achievement subject in the burnout society. He has this powerful sentence. These social developments and structural changes are bringing human society deeper and deeper into the wilderness. He says, here talks about the good life. He says, concern for the good life, which concern for the good life is yielding more and more to the simple concern for survival. And he hints here, he begins to hint at alternatives for a hyper-stimulating point of view. He mentions the artist Cézanne, and he says, Cézanne was a master of deep contemplative attention, and he once remarked that he could see the fragrance of things. This visualization of fragrances requires profound attention. In the contemplative state, one steps outside oneself, so to speak, and immerses oneself in the surroundings. Immerses oneself in the surroundings. And Merleau-Ponty, who I think was maybe a sociologist, a French sociologist, describes Cézanne's mode of contemplatively observing a landscape as a kind of externalization or de-interiorization. This de-interiorization is very similar to what was described to me in Zazen practice. You sit in one spot and you have initially a very clear and firm boundary between inside and outside. You have the inside and the outside. But what Merleau-Ponty is saying Cézanne does is he would start by discovering the geological structure of the landscape. And then he would halt and gaze, eyes dilated. The landscape, Cézanne said, the landscape thinks itself in me, and I am its consciousness. So when you sit and you let yourself get a little bored and you stare at the wall, or if you're meditating, doing Zazen, staring at the floor, you experience some anxiety and your boundaries shiver, and your boundaries shiver and shake. And then they begin to wobble like a mirage. And then the boundaries begin to dissolve. And the landscape, the surroundings, think themselves in you. And you can see your surroundings, yourself in your surroundings. The boundaries between self and other, or inside and outside, blur and become one. So in this chapter called Profound Boredom, which is about a third of the way through this very short book, already Byung-Chul Han is suggesting alternatives to burnout culture and achievement society. And what he's suggesting, insert clapping sound here, what he's suggesting is what the Zen masters have been talking about all along, and what I believe people discover on their own because it's their natural birthright, which is the integrity of silence. Relax. Relaxation. Rest, contemplation, taking a moment, a pause, hitting the reset button. The word Zen means single-pointed concentration, bringing your focus to a point. So to give yourself to Zazen is to exclude. It's to say no. It's to say no to the phone. It's to say no to another cup of coffee. It's to say no to binging on Netflix. It's to say no to getting into a fight with your spouse. It's to say no to everything that could distract you. And then you sit down on the cushion, and it's to, in a sense, say no to your thinking, busy, overworked mind, or to say no to that internalized work camp that was mentioned earlier. And it's to focus down to such a narrow point that your focusing mechanism and the self that focused itself dissolves. And this is hitting the reset button. That's what I call hitting the reset button. All that crazy, busy activity, that gerbil on the wheel, that rat in the rat race inside your head, all of that dissolves. So we got through about half, a little under half of the Burnout Society today. I think we'll pause here. I'm not going to torture you with any more postmodern philosophy, but there's just a few things I'm taking away from this. One of which is if you feel burned out, if you feel stressed, if you feel overworked and anxious and depressed, you're not alone. And I think for you, And for me, what's being suggested here are some moments of silence within our day, hitting the reset button, what I call sacred time. And it can take many, many different forms, but it's almost like you're reclaiming your humanity from burnout culture and achievement society. And it can happen in many, many different ways. A really good way to do this is Zazen meditation practice, or a mindfulness practice if that's what you're doing. Maybe you chant or pray, but whatever the case, taking explicit time, however often you need to, for sacred time, I call that, where you're sitting down in one spot and you're leaving your human concerns outside the door and you're meditating or praying or whatever it is. But you can also take this sacred time or hit the reset button just when you're out in the world. I mean, the other day I was sitting at Praterstern bus station and I was waiting for the bus and it got too cold outside, so I came inside and I was standing inside looking through the doors, and I decided to just kind of do some standing meditation right then and there. And I noticed right in front of me in the train station outside, up in like the rafters of the train station, there was a pigeon's nest. First of all, I didn't even really know pigeons had nests. I mean, of course they do, but there were two pigeons, I'm assuming like a male pigeon and a female pigeon, maybe two female pigeons or something. I don't know, but they were like kind of relating to each other and tending to each other and tending to this nest. And it was kind of up high, and I never see pigeons up that high. I always see them scurrying around on the dirty ground, pecking at French fries and cigarette butts. But here these pigeons were up in the rafters, and it reminded me that I think that the pigeon is related to the dove, and suddenly I saw these pigeons as doves, these like angelic, godlike creatures and angels up in the rafters relating to each other. It was really a beautiful moment now that I think about it. At the time I was just like, oh, pigeons in a nest. It was a moment when I was able to pull out of the rat race and get some perspective on my surroundings. And through that perspective, the dirty little grubby pigeons became transcendent doves. They became the Holy Ghost. It's a very convincingly secular world, you know? I mean, it's very convincingly secular. But ultimately, as my teacher used to say, everything is illuminating. Everything is illuminating as the self, as the Buddha, as Buddha nature. Even the pigeons in the cold, bustling, crowded train station. Our birthright is not to be slaves or to even enslave ourselves to the achievement model. Our birthright is Buddhahood. Oh, to be awake. Thanks for watching. If you hit like and you hit subscribe, it helps this channel out, so I appreciate it. If you want to support this channel, come on over to Patreon. There's a link in the description below. I've got essays and blog posts up there. Got nice people that I'm interacting with. I'm always like blown away by the support that comes through Patreon. It's like an example of the absolute best of the internet. It's just people saying, I like what you're doing. I support it. Here you go. There's no one is holding a gun to anybody's head. People are just out of the kindness of their hearts are supporting what I do here. And it gives me so much energy and so much help as I keep this channel going and explore these topics for you. I think I'm gonna, at some point, do a video on the philosophy of Zen Buddhism by Byung-Chul Han, so we'll see how that goes. If there's any other topics you want me to do, shoot me an email. I will put the, actually it's somewhere in this channel, I don't know where, but I'll put it in the description below too. People always have great suggestions on video topics. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.